In small-town Ohio, a woman is beaten to death in cold blood.
This was a pretty heinous crime. Very, very violent.
Her granddaughter bears witness and pays the price.
She had a very deep bruise in her cheek, ligature marks around her neck. She just had blood all over.
It shook people.
The law comes after the girl's uncle. But did he really commit the crime?
I'm telling you right now, you are making a big mistake.
Only forensic science can identify the real killer.
He didn't do this.
This dramatic reconstruction is based on eyewitness accounts, police evidence, and court records. Barberton, Ohio, June 7th, 1998. 6-year-old Brooke Sutton wakes up to find that her nightmare is real.
Grandma, where are you?
Her grandmother, Judy Johnson, has been savagely attacked.
Grandma. Grandma.
Unable to revive her, Brooke runs to a neighbor for help.
You got my mom. Someone killed Grandma. I need you to get my mom.
Judy's neighbor drives Brooke to her parents' place, just over a mile away.
Daddy, someone got Grandma.
Her father, David, Judy's son-in-law, is stunned by what he sees.
Brooke was pounding on the door. I went downstairs, opened the door. Brooke was standing there covered head to toe in blood.
She came to my house.
Brooke's mother, April, is met by the same shocking sight.
She was in my mother's pink nightgown, and it was covered in blood. And I asked her what was wrong, and she told me my mom was dead, laying in front of the couch. And I asked her if she was sure, and she said yes, she was sure.
Someone got Grandma.
I'm gonna go over to your mom, so I'm gonna check this out.
I don't know, I just kind of figured maybe that Judy was just hurt. You know, I didn't think that she was actually dead. I used to be a nursing assistant, so I'm thinking, well, maybe she's just hurt and I can help. I guess I was hoping for the best. Judy was laying in the living room right by the door, face down. There was blood everywhere. I checked for a pulse. She didn't have a pulse. I tried to shake her, called her name, Mom. I was gonna try to do CPR, and when I went to move her, the rigor mortis had already set in. There was nothing I could do. I grabbed the phone, and when I called 911, told her that I was in my mother-in-law's house and that she was dead. Somebody had murdered her.
The police arrive within minutes. It's clear that Judy was the victim of a horrible beating. No murder weapon is apparent. The doors and windows are intact. Either the door was unlocked or Judy let her murderer in. She might have known him. Judy's granddaughter, Brooke, is taken to Barberton Citizens Hospital. She saw the crime unfold, but she's not just a witness. She's also a victim.
She had a very deep, deep bruise, sort of in a moon shape. She had bruises up and down her arms, on her legs.
All she remembers is being smashed in the face. But there is worse to come.
Before you go in, there's something I have to tell you.
They had told us that she had been raped and sodomized. That's the worst feeling I've ever had. I can't describe it. I think I almost fainted, actually.
You're better off to be a sinner than to hurt a child. You know, that's like one of the worst things you can possibly do in God's eyes.
The parents give permission for a rape kit procedure. The collection of any hair, semen, and other trace evidence.
Brooke, who did this to you?
Clarence.
Clarence who?
Uncle Clarence.
The Suttons can't believe their daughter has just implicated April's brother-in-law in the crime.
She just said that Uncle Clarence had got in the house and got Grandma. And when I asked her, what do you mean got Grandma? She said, Uncle Clarence killed Grandma.
But I had to believe her. She was there, I wasn't. And she's my daughter, so I'm gonna believe what she's telling me.
I didn't handle it well, there's no doubt. I actually asked the cop, you know, if he'd shoot Clarence.
Angry and distraught, David tells police where to find his brother-in-law. And they are soon on their way to Clarence Elkin's home, 40 miles outside of town. Melinda Elkins is April Sutton's sister. She is married to Clarence Elkins and is about to receive the worst news of her life.
Clarence heard a car flying up our driveway, and he went out the back door, and he's looking really confused. And then I seen police running out of the woods in SWAT gear. And then, one coming through the front door. I mean, it happened really, really quickly. He's asking me a lot of questions, strange questions.
We need to know, when was the last time you saw your mother?
Your state of mind is, you can't comprehend what the heck is going on. And then in one sentence, he said, Barberton Police Department got a call that a Judith Johnson had been stabbed in her home, and her granddaughter had been attacked, and the granddaughter is saying that it was her Uncle Clarence. That was all in one sentence. So then you try to wrap your brain around what he's saying, and I said, is my mom okay? And he said, no, she's been murdered.
Melinda Elkins can only watch in shock and horror as her husband is taken away. Her world has been suddenly turned upside down. Clarence Elkins is brought to the Barberton Police Department, where he is arrested for the murder of Judy Johnson and the rape of Brooke Sutton.
When Judith Johnson was murdered in June of 1998, that was a big story for the Barberton community. Barberton is still a place where many people don't lock their door. But since this was a pretty heinous crime, very, very violent, it shook people because it upset their way of life.
The suspect proclaims his complete innocence. But for the moment, police are focused on the victims. For Judy Johnson, a tough life has reached a tragic conclusion.
My mom was married 3 times, so she was in and out of relationships, and she actually went blind for 2 years due to a domestic violence situation. But she was a happy person.
When my mother became a grandmother, she was just thrilled, and you could tell, you could see it in her face that she was just proud.
Judy and Brooke would regularly spend sleepover evenings watching their favorite TV shows. But their routine would come to a sudden and violent end. Investigators begin to piece together the brutal events of the previous night.
So what do we got?
Judy's state of rigor mortis sets her time of death between 2:30 and 5:30 a.m. Her skull is fractured and 2 vertebrae are crushed. Her jaw, nose, ribs, and right collarbone are also broken. Multiple blows to the head, chest, and neck are what killed her. Based on her injuries, the weapon is determined to be a blunt object, such as a tire iron or lead pipe. Signs of struggle in the small bungalow are everywhere. Blood spatter on the walls, on the ceiling, in the kitchen and outside the bedroom where Brooke slept indicate Judy battled her attacker fiercely before being brought down in front of the couch. Some of Judy's fingernails are broken, and there is hair caught in her jewelry. There are defensive wounds on her hands and arms.
She put up a fight. Tough old lady.
But at 5'1" and 118 pounds, Judy was no match for the killer. Her underwear is pulled down, and it is apparent she has been sexually assaulted. Vaginal swabs and trace evidence recovery procedures are administered and tested for male DNA.
To the front, to your left. Okay, get your watch.
Based on Brooke Sutton's witness statement, the cops dig into the prime suspect, Clarence Elkins. He is examined for traces of hair, blood, and other incriminating evidence. They take fingerprints, inspect his hair, his clothes. They also take a sample of DNA. Deputies search his car and his house inch by inch. Suspicion deepens when a pair of blood-stained jeans are found in his bedroom. The family is in shock. No one would ever have thought Clarence capable of such violence.
I've known Clarence since I was 8, and to me, he's like a brother. Not a brother-in-law, but an actual brother. It was heartbreaking for me to even think that he would have something to do with this.
I was like, Brooke, are you sure? She's like, yeah, Dad, Grandma's dead. Uncle Clarence killed Grandma.
I did sit there for a while thinking about, did Clarence do this? Is Brooke correct? Does she know who she's seen? But I have to believe her. She's my daughter.
I mean, you have to take your kid's word over anybody's, you know?
Investigators now interrogate the man they believe is responsible for the savage crimes.
Okay, Clarence. Let's talk about yesterday.
So where was Clarence last night?
At the same time, they interview Elkin's wife, Melinda.
Where were you? What were you doing? And who were you with?
I had some work to do out in the yard. I had a couple of beers at home. Later, I drove out to a bar called the West End Inn. It's out near Malvern.
Time?
I guess around 11. I had some drinks there. Just a few. My wife, Melinda, showed up around midnight or so.
I saw him at the bar. I went over for a drink, but I didn't stay very long because my youngest son was sick.
Melinda went home. I stayed out drinking. Had a few more bars. Got home around 2:30.
I heard him come in, and we didn't say anything to one another. Just he stumbled by and went up to bed.
Then I went off to bed. Then I woke up and got arrested.
But Clarence's drinking buddy tells a different story. He says that Clarence was getting blind drunk.
And would you say he was angry?
Yeah, for sure he was. Yeah.
And what was he angry about?
All the women in his life, that's what he told me.
He tells police that when Melinda showed up, they got into a fight.
You've been out here all damn night.
Why don't you get out of here, you bitch?
Relax, take it easy.
What'd you say? What did you say?
Clarence.
Investigators interview more witnesses who tell them of Clarence's hot temper, strained marriage, and hatred for his mother-in-law.
The investigating officers very quickly gathered enough information about the situation between Clarence, Melinda, and Judith to recognize motive.
Middle of the afternoon, you're already drunk.
One more word out of you, I'll take those glasses and ram right down your throat.
Testimony by friends of Judith Johnson was that she had told them she was afraid of Clarence.
Get your hands off me.
But don't you interfere with my family, Judy! You stupid bitch! Shut up, April!
She had told them that the two of them were estranged, that she didn't have any use for him.
Judy, you mess with me, and you will regret it.
She didn't want him around. She thought her daughter had made a mistake in marrying him. Judith hated Clarence, and Clarence hated her right back. I don't think there was ever any question about that in anyone's mind.
Clarence Elkins goes on trial, charged with aggravated murder and rape. The prosecution seeks the death penalty. Elkins maintains his innocence, but his in-laws have condemned him, and two sisters are torn apart.
I really thought it was Clarence. So I was going to help, put Clarence in jail any way I could. Because I was actually going for the death penalty.
I told him, I said, I'm telling you right now, you are making a big mistake. He didn't do this.
Yeah, I was surprised that she stood by Clarence. I really was.
The prosecution lays out its case, first gathering testimony that on June 6th, 1998, Clarence had been drinking heavily all day. After fighting with his wife and hitting several more bars, he returned home drunk and angry around 2:30 a.m. He told his wife he was going to bed, but he waited for Melinda to fall asleep, grabbed the keys to Judy Johnson's house, and drove the 40 miles to Barberton. He came prepared with some kind of blunt weapon. Used his wife's keys to enter Judy's home, and once and for all, dealt with his hated mother-in-law. Beaten into submission, Judy was then raped by the merciless Elkins. Maybe he did not realize his 6-year-old niece was staying over, but Brooke had seen him, and he knew he could not let her live. He attacked the defenseless girl, raping her and leaving her for dead. Clarence makes a poor impression on the jury.
Clarence was probably his own worst enemy in this trial. I mean, he came in there every day of the trial, just glaring at everyone in there. Was this anger? Was this a little tinge of that alcohol rage?
You're with my family, Judy, you stupid bitch! Shut up!
That he was capable of? At that time, I thought, my goodness, what a monster this guy must be.
Many witnesses are called, but by far the most important is Brooke herself. She is the cornerstone of the prosecution's case.
Brooke, can you tell me what happened on the night of June 6th of last year?
I heard a noise and some people talking and shouting.
She spoke in a minimum of words.
And then what happened?
Then I got out and I looked into the room and I saw a man.
She wasn't up there to chat.
Did he see you?
A question was put to her. She took a few seconds to think it over and answered.
And who was it that you saw?
My Uncle Clarence.
Where is he now? Thank you. No further questions.
The directness of her testimony was the main element in how compelling her testimony was.
The room was dark. You were probably very scared because of all that noise. Maybe you saw someone you thought was your uncle, but really wasn't.
No, it was my Uncle Clarence.
The defense tries to counter Brooke's testimony, but the child does not waver. Then they put forth their strongest argument, the lack of physical evidence tying Clarence Elkins to the crime scene. Lab results have shown that none of his DNA was found in either rape kit, and that's not all.
The defense actually had hairs that were found on my mom at the crime scene, and they had those tested, and they did not match Clarence.
Furthermore, no incriminating evidence was recovered on his person, in his house, or in his car. The blood found on his jeans was his own.
The prosecution said it's irrelevant. They had an eyewitness who said it was Clarence. That was it. Rock bottom, that was the trial.
Melinda provides an alibi for his timeline on the night of the murder and vouches for his character, telling the court he is not the violent man he is portrayed as being. But none of it matters.
I had asked the attorney, what do you think our chances are? And he said, it's however they believe the little girl. And then I knew it was not going to come back good.
After 14 hours of deliberation, the jury returns with its verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant Clarence Elkins guilty.
I thought the verdict that the jury delivered was simply inevitable given the testimony that had come out during the trial.
Yeah, I was devastated. It really took its toll on me when they read the verdict and Clarence put his head down and just was in complete disbelief. You know, and I'm thinking, this can't be real. This cannot be real. And then thinking, they're not going to get away with this.
Elkins avoids the death penalty when the jury convicts him of murder, but not aggravated murder, a very thin distinction. Still, with consecutive life sentences, he will not be eligible for parole for 55 years.
The sense in the community was simply that Clarence got what he deserved. He hated his mother-in-law so much that he just snapped, killed her, did these other evil things, explainable.
Only Melinda still believes in her husband's innocence.
I made a vow to my mom when they buried her that I was going to find out who did it. And I knew that I had to keep that vow.
Proving Clarence not guilty promises to be a formidable task. And the family that shunned Melinda when her husband was charged is no help now that he's convicted.
I know he didn't do it. By that point, my family was not really wanting to talk to me or hear anything I had to say. So I was kind of left alone to, deal with this.
I'm gonna get you out of here.
Against seemingly impossible odds, the Barberton housewife sets out on a journey to free her husband and bring the real killer of her mother to justice. 3 years pass, and Clarence Elkins remains in jail. Finally, Melinda contacts Martin Yant, a private investigator who specializes in wrongful convictions.
What I primarily look at is the evidence and the facts. And in this case, when I did that, I felt that there was an overwhelming amount of evidence that had been pretty much ignored.
Yant enlists forensic consultant Michael Sink to help him evaluate the case.
Whenever somebody commits a crime, They go into a house or into a situation, and they're going to leave something of themselves behind that's going to link them to the crime.
After reviewing the police records of Judy Johnson's murder, Yant and Sink conclude that the investigation was flawed from the outset.
Some of the things that seemed lacking to me in the investigation as far as forensic analysis was that they collected a lot of items that they felt could have been handled by the suspect. These items were never processed, as far as I know, for latent prints.
The coroner's office did do scrapings of Judy Johnson's fingernails, but this was never tested.
In my opinion, they didn't collect enough blood evidence because there's blood in 3 or 4 different rooms.
I began to see that there was a lot of evidence that had been ignored and evidence that may have pointed in other directions.
Come on, you gotta have some kind of physical evidence if you're alleging 2 counts of rape.
Yant and Sink note the items that were tested did not implicate Clarence.
The investigators had a mindset, and this is dangerous with police agencies and prosecuting attorneys. You get a mindset that it's got to be this guy and nobody else but this guy. And they focus in on that individual to the point where they're blinded to what the evidence is telling them.
But this portrait of a bungled investigation will not by itself help Clarence's case.
I decided with all this evidence that was available that we should really push for DNA testing. And since the court didn't seem to want to order that I finally came up with the idea that we collect our own DNA specimens. So that's what we started to do.
The team begins by searching the exterior of Judy Johnson's house, wondering what police might have missed 3 years ago. In some bushes in the backyard, they make a grisly discovery.
In the bushes were cat remains. My mom had a cat that was not found after my mom's death.
It's apparent Judy's cat had been strangled with a string of Christmas lights.
And there was a C-clamp that was shoved down into the cat.
The C-clamp is a carpentry tool and possibly a weapon used in the attack on Brooke.
Here are potentially a couple of important pieces of evidence that were just totally missed.
A study of Brooke's facial injury photos suggests her crescent-shaped wound was indeed a result of being struck with the C-clamp. But despite these and other findings, law enforcement has no interest in reopening the case. Melinda comes to the realization she must find the real killer herself if she hopes to free her husband. She makes a list of potential suspects.
I was looking for people who knew my mom or had some kind of connection to being around her. And, I'd take these names and then I would research their criminal background. I knew it hinged on DNA.
Melinda's favorite TV show gives her a crash course in forensics.
I watched forensic files all the time, trying to get clues on what's the best substance to get for DNA, what's the best way to collect it, what's the best way to preserve it. No person can commit the perfect murder.
Melinda flirts with her suspects and collects anything from them that could be used to provide a DNA sample.
I would track them down, strike up a conversation, and if they would look away for a split second and was done with that cigarette butt, I'd take it. And then if they got up to go to the bathroom and they were just about done with their beer, I would take that.
Melinda carefully collects and catalogs dozens of samples, but there's a problem.
I never really thought about, okay, well, how am I going to have this tested? How am I going to have it tested against, the crime scene evidence? I wasn't thinking about that. I just knew I had to get the DNA, and then I'd work everything out later.
For us to be trying to pay for the testing ourselves, there are cost considerations. The reality of DNA testing is that it's very expensive.
The legal fees from Clarence's trial have left Melinda broke. DNA tests will cost several $1,000s, and she can't afford them. With the forensics on hold, she and Yant pursue another avenue. Brooke.
I told Melinda that her niece knew a lot that would be helpful.
He said to me, I think it's time that you talk to your sister and let her know the evidence that we have, if for nothing else, to get her mind wrapped around the fact that it could have been someone else. And I was so nervous.
Melinda and April have not spoken for 3.5 years.
I never thought that my sister and I would ever talk again. We hugged for like 10 minutes, I think.
And I knew that that was the moment that we could actually sit down and talk. It was a hard moment for Brooke because she didn't know how to react. And when we hugged, it was like all that pain had just, melted away.
You're so big now. Look at you.
When Yant has a chance to talk with Brooke, he has an extraordinary revelation.
So, Brooke, let's go over this again.
I've never really been sure, I guess.
I just said, are you still certain that it was Uncle Clarence? And she said, I was never certain. My mouth fell open. I didn't expect to hear that. Brooke said she expressed some of these misgivings and that she was repeatedly encouraged by the prosecution that she was right, that she should stick with her story. And here, immediately, she said, maybe I made a mistake.
In 2002, Brooke formally recants the testimony that condemned her uncle. Armed with her deposition, Clarence Elkin's lawyer seeks a retrial. But after months of review, the judge tells the family what they don't want to hear.
He came back with the conclusion that Brooke had been coerced by her family to change her testimony and that he was not granting a new trial.
Despite all the new evidence, neither police nor the courts care to revisit the case. 4 years on, Clarence remains in jail.
It was like David and Goliath. How can I take on the whole state of Ohio, and prove him innocent when every door that I tried to open was shut?
Undaunted, Melinda carries on. With help from family, friends, and the media, she raises over $40,000 to fund DNA testing of the evidence she's already collected from her list of suspects. There is also a new and promising lead, a local man, Ryle Rush.
I had asked my mom's friend about this guy, and she said, oh, he had such a crush on your mom.
Can I get you another round? Some vino? Hey, 2 wine.
And my mom said he was too young, and she had told him that, I'm old enough to be your mother, and...
That's enough. Best you go and find yourself someone your own age.
So I immediately began to think, maybe he felt rejected. And, just decided to punish her for rejecting him.
He had a strong resemblance to Clarence. In addition, according to some friends and people who interacted with him, he had a scratch on his face right after the murder.
Yant learns Rush has a reputation for violent behavior and was known to carry a sawed-off pool cue for protection. It could have been the murder weapon.
All these things made him, in our minds, a good suspect.
So,
Yant shows Brooke a picture of Rush.
recognize this guy.
That's him. I remember his eyes.
She immediately identifies him as the real attacker. As rumors spread and public pressure mounts, Rush volunteers a DNA sample to police.
Is that it?
Now that she has the money to test the samples, Melinda needs the best legal advice she can find. She contacts Mark Godsey, leader of the Ohio Innocence Project at the University of Cincinnati, and known for his work on wrongful convictions.
I was in my office when Melinda called the first time. She was calm and rational, and she knew the facts. She was immediately talking about DNA in a way that an average family member of an inmate will not be able to talk. So it was more like talking to a lawyer or an investigator.
Godsey agrees to take her case.
He told me that he would assign 2 students to it the very next day, and they would start researching it.
I could quickly discern that this is a case where DNA testing needed to be done because there were several key pieces of evidence, underclothing that the victims had worn, fingernail scrapings, rape kits, that had been screened in 1998 and determined that no DNA was present. Technology has advanced so much since 1998 that we can now, in many of those cases, go back and get DNA readings that are conclusive that we could not have gotten then.
Forensic scientists select vaginal swabs taken from Judy, scrapings from her fingernails, and DNA from Brooke's clothing. These crime scene samples are compared to the DNA profiles of Ryle Rush and Clarence Elkins.
We got the results from the DNA testing showing A, that there was male DNA present at the crime scene from the attacker, B, that it did not match Clarence Elkins.
The good news is quickly overshadowed by bad news. The crime scene DNA does not match Ryle Rush either. Melinda's prime suspect is not the killer.
The prosecutors, they were kind of validating their thoughts of me in the media. It's like, see, we told you, she's crazy.
In 2005, Clarence Elkins is again denied a new trial.
He denied the motion. Denied it. Clarence, I don't even know what to say.
I was livid. I just couldn't believe this. The DNA doesn't match Clarence. Then that means it had to have been someone else.
Melinda Elkins' crusade to free her husband hits rock bottom. But everything changes when a front-page newspaper article catches her eye.
I know who did it.
What are you talking about?
The article is about convicted child rapist Earl Mann. But the name of Mann's girlfriend connects the dots to this new suspect.
This article was on the front page, and her name just jumped out of the page.
Do you remember Tonya Brazel?
Yeah.
She was my mother's neighbor.
The same neighbor who drove Brooke to her parents the morning of the murder.
Mom, someone killed Grandma. I need you to get my mom.
Just give me a couple of minutes.
Melinda and Yant pore over the neighbor's court testimony and realize there was something very odd about her behavior on that terrible day.
She never called the police or let my niece in, never called an ambulance, and left her standing on a porch for 45 minutes. Something was wrong there.
Melinda suspects the reason for the long delay is because the woman was somehow covering for her boyfriend, Earl Mann. Melinda now suspects Mann may be her mother's real killer.
He lives 2 doors away from my mom. He's a child rapist. He's got violent tendencies. He has convictions of being violent. Wow. I need to check this guy out.
Intrigued, Melinda digs into Earl Mann's criminal history. His record of child rapes and violence against both adults and children convinces her that he is likely behind the attacks on her mother and niece. She learns that he was in the neighborhood when the crime was committed, having escaped from a halfway house only a few days before. But unfortunately for Melinda, her suspect is already serving time in the Ohio state penal system for an unrelated crime. Melinda needs a DNA sample from him. But how can she get it?
Dear Earl, You don't know me, but I saw your picture in the newspaper and I thought I would write to you and say hello.
I was writing him letters. I wanted his DNA. And I'd write him a letter as a fictitious person and offering to send him money and just felt a connection with him. And it was pretty sickening, actually, to have to write those letters. But I would always send a stamped envelope so that he could send it back and lick the envelope to seal it.
Melinda Elkins writes over a dozen letters to Mann. He does not take the bait. But incredibly good fortune is on her side.
I kept tracking him from prison to prison, and oh my God, I looked on the web one day on the Ohio offenders list, and he was placed in the same prison as Clarence. Okay, this is either a miracle or I'm hallucinating. What are the odds, out of all the correctional facilities in Ohio, that he would end up in the same prison, in the same pod, with Clarence?
Clarence doesn't waste any time. At the first opportunity, he obtains one of Mann's discarded cigarette butts.
It's an absolute miracle, because he was moved out of that prison 2 days later for an attack on another inmate. So it would have been the very last chance that we could ever try to get anything from him.
Melinda has had good luck. Luck that now needs the support of forensic science. Clarence Elkin's hope for freedom lies in a discarded cigarette butt. He mails the evidence to Melinda, who immediately sends it to the lab. Earl Mann's DNA is recovered from the cigarette and compared against DNA from the crime scene, using an advanced technique.
In about 2002, a new type was developed called YSTR, which reads the profile on the Y chromosome. The reason why this is a more sensitive and more advanced test is that only men have a Y chromosome.
The test successfully matches Mann's Y chromosome profile to the male profile recovered from the crime scene in 1998.
His paternal YSTR profile was very rare. It had never been seen before in more than 4,000 tests.
Prosecutors dig their heels in, claiming that YSTR testing is unreliable. In response, Godsey has the lab further refine the testing. Now, Mann's maternal line of DNA is compared with crime scene samples. Again, it's a match.
We also found that suspect's maternal line at the crime scene. We found his mitochondrial profile at the crime scene.
Now the chances of the crime scene DNA not belonging to Mann are 19 million to 1.
The FBI considers 1 in 19 million a conclusive match.
It comes to light Brooke Sutton sometimes played with the children of Earl Mann's girlfriend. Mann could very well have met her and chosen her as a target. As a child rapist and violent offender, he had motive. As someone hiding out just 2 doors down from Judy, he had opportunity. Judy may have left the door open. Mann's target may have been Brooke. It may have been Judy. Either way, both would pay for his savagery. With public pressure building to exonerate Clarence Elkins, Ohio's Attorney General gets involved.
We in this office really believe in DNA. If this DNA evidence that we have today would have been presented at the time of the conviction, I cannot conceive of a jury finding Clarence Elkins guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
The Attorney General actually set a precedence because there's no record of any Attorney General ever getting involved with a convicted murderer and rapist and coming out swinging for them. We were going to have a press conference the following day to demand that they release Clarence. And about 5-10 minutes before we went into our press conference with the Attorney General, we got an announcement that the Summit County prosecutors are dropping all charges against Clarence and releasing him from prison that day.
Yeah, it's me.
Are you ready to come home?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Well, pack your things. Because we're coming to get you right now.
Okay.
I mean, you're just like, you know, it happened. We did it. We beat him. That was amazing.
The man who only escaped the death penalty because of the slightest change in his murder conviction is now free.
It felt like victory. One part of my journey was completed, what I had strived for 7.5 years. And I felt so happy for Clarence and my children, my sons, to see their dad walk out of prison, a free man. But everyone thought, okay, he's out, and that's the end. That's it. Well, it's not it. The person who committed this crime has not been punished yet.
In June 2007, Earl Mann is charged with the murder and double rape of Judy Johnson and Brooke Sutton. His trial is scheduled to begin in August of 2008. The prosecution has made it known they intend to seek the death penalty.